Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Show to View with Mike G, the show of life, the show of China, the show of law and pivoting and changing industries and everything in between. Today, we're talking with Bill Eisler of Ming River Baijiu. Now, here's the thing. You know I like mezcal. You know I'm deeply interested into fermentation and even some classifications, DOs, if you will. This is an incredible episode because I learned so much about fermentation, starters, aging, distillation, and everything in between. So I'm going to say this as kind of a warning, so to speak, for those of you. So if you're listening to this episode and you want a crash course, detailed, not super nerdy, but a great 101 look into Baijiu, then stay tuned because this is an incredible thing. 4 classifications of Baijiu based on aroma, not region, not states of production. It's a completely different thing. So if you've got it in you to learn about spirits in a very, very detailed but beautiful way, Bill's a great guide for us here. We sip through 4 samples of Baijiu, including Ming River, which is incredibly estery, like a Jamaican rum. Again, most of these episodes I've done, as you know, through the years are about people and their personalities. But this time, it's about the product and the classifications. Great category introduction. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this great chat with Bill Eisler from Ming River.
I first went there in 2000 on a study abroad program.
Oh.
So I was studying Chinese in college.
At Columbia, right?
Yeah. You know,
language and history, it looked like.
Yeah,
okay.
you know all about me.
Yeah, I tried to be somewhat prepared, right?
You're like the CIA.
No, it's not that bad. Yeah.
So I did study abroad, and then I did internships with a law firm and a couple other summers. So I originally had planned on coming back, going to law school, and having like a traditional career, if you will, working for probably a U.S. firm in China, doing
what kind of law?
Like corporate stuff.
Corporate law, like contracts, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And serving a lot of the people doing foreign direct investment into China, which was the big trend at the time. Was everybody was investing in China, and they needed people to help them in China. So that was the original plan. Mm-hmm. And
roughly how old were you when this was kind of unfolding? Because this is at your studies at Columbia that you do the study abroad for a couple of semesters, I guess.
Summer.
Okay.
Summer, yeah.
Which can be brutal in China, depending where you are.
95, very, very brutal in Beijing. I remember it was all centigrade, but if the temperature went up to 40 degrees centigrade, they would shut down the factories. So people always said that they were misreporting the weather, so that people would have to keep working because they didn't have AC in most of the places.
Right.
Yeah, it was brutal. I was like 19 then.
Yeah. Oh, so super young. Now we'll get back to this because obviously your story has like many tales to it, quite serpentine. But for me, I remember relatively the moment where I became infatuated with Britain, UK, right? And it's driven a lot of my musical taste, some of the aesthetic and language and all that. But for you, China is a specific thing. Now I know it's massive, but what drew you to China?
It's a funny story. So I got to travel a lot when I was young. My parents took me everywhere.
Just for fun, or was it for work?
Just for fun. Cool. My dad was a doctor.
Yeah.
I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and my dad was a doctor. My mom was a retired teacher.
Oh, cool.
So not for work in any way, but he liked to travel, and my mom would go along.
She didn't like
my grandfather loved to travel, so I guess that's where my father got it from. Mm-hmm. So, when my brother and I were kids, we got to go to Africa, Japan.
Wow.
I spent about a month in Europe every year. So we got to go everywhere.
That's incredible, yeah.
But when my parents went to China, they didn't take us.
Wait, why?
They said that China was not a good place for children. This was in the 80s when China was a very different place than it is now. You couldn't travel as freely. You had to go on a bus.
Yep.
As part of a group. You couldn't just be independent. Like when we went to Japan, we could travel everywhere by ourselves. You couldn't do that in China. And, it was much less developed than it is now, even in terms of sanitation, what have you. So they didn't think it was a good place to bring children. So they didn't take us.
Oh, I can see something happening.
Yeah, and I was not happy about that. Yeah. So they had my grandparents, my mother's parents, come to Orlando and stay in our house and take care of my brother and me while they went to China. And after they were in China, I missed them. My grandparents managed to get them on the phone, which was kind of a big deal to have a call to people in China in the mid 80s. So it probably cost quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Had them on the phone and said, I really want to go. And they said, well, if you dig a hole through the center of the earth, you can pop out on the other side.
Yeah.
So being, 5 or 6 years old, okay, I can try that. So we grew up right next to a lake. So the water table was very high. So it didn't get very far, but I got, a couple feet down and then hit the water table, and that was that. So I said, well, when I grow up, I'm going to go on my own.
I like that because I did the same thing. But it was nowhere near a lake and nowhere as effective, I think. I was doing it like an apartment complex or something. But I love that kind of mysticism about it, because I think we probably grew up in roughly the same time. And it wasn't it kind of like special, and like there's the dragons, and like for me aesthetically it was really, really fascinating as a kid. Yeah, and that was a reason I was kind of always had this kind of passion for that culture. But do you remember?
I remember they came back and they had all of the traditional costumes and everything, even from some of the hill tribe minorities in the Southwest. Yeah. And I used what they brought back as a Halloween costume, and I kind of got into it. Yeah.
Do you remember cooking with Yen? Do you remember Yen? He was like the in the 80s.
Is that Martin Yen? Yeah.
You remember him?
Mm-hmm. So he actually has had NY China in San Francisco, which shut down during COVID, but actually was one of our top accounts in San Francisco is NY China. Yeah.
Oh, that's very
cool. Like NY being Martin Yen.
Yeah, that guy. He was on PBS all the time. I remember watching it. It was another thing because he's going through the markets anyway. So it's kind of a rich, lush place, and had the privilege of going there. But all right, so. Your dad's a doctor, right? Or was a doctor?
Yeah.
Any pressure to follow in those footsteps? Or is like, Bill, just, do what you want to do?
Pretty much do what I want to do. Always encouraged me to get a good education. Was kind enough to let me go to Columbia and not have to, have a job or take out student loans. So that was very generous of him. They always supported education, but always supported me in doing what I wanted to do. So no, there was no pressure to be a doctor. I'm sure nothing would have made him happier.
Yeah.
And, we did go to the clinic sometimes when we were kids, and he showed us, how things worked. I even got to watch him do cataract surgery.
Oh, wow.
Before. So it was.
He's ophthalmologist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw them like, that's really interesting, but like, I don't want to be doing this.
It's a little dicey, it's kind of. After watching Anshin and Andalou, right, slicing up, I've had a thing with people cutting eyes, but I get it. And so how was New York? Because, I mean, since you're well-traveled, I imagine you probably adapted to it pretty well. Mm-hmm. Such a worldly city. And had you been there before as a kid, too?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's kind of back, like, it's not that far from Florida, really.
Yeah, when I went to middle school and high school in New England, went to boarding school. So I kind of wanted... Right? I went to high school in Connecticut and then at middle school in New Hampshire.
Okay.
So also in not the part of Connecticut that's right close to New York either, so quite rural, very quiet, very nice. So for college, I was like, I want to go somewhere in a big city, and
just a contrast.
Yeah,
man, I don't know anything about boarding schools. What is that like?
That's kind of a broad question. What's
Sorry,
is
it too structured?
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I liked it actually.
Yeah.
But I like the intellectual atmosphere there versus Florida.
There you go. Yeah.
I was never a huge fan of Florida.
Yeah, has anybody been a fan of Florida?
Somebody must. They're gaining population. Texas and Florida right now are actually gaining population. People are leaving. People are leaving California to come here, and they're leaving New York to go to Florida.
They're leaving New York to go to Florida?
Oh yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that.
lots of people.
Like people from the city? Or
Yeah.
people up? No kidding. Seems like a weird kind of conflict of beliefs going
Yeah.
into Florida like that. I
Hey,
just find it that way.
hey, everything's open. No state income tax.
Yeah, good point. Same with Texas too. Well,
Yep.
which is
That's what
what.
I'm saying. Similar thing. You got the people from California
Yeah.
fleeing that to come here, and
Right.
people from New York are going to Miami.
That's so interesting. I had no idea about the Florida piece.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the thing about being a worldly kid is I think that you don't ever see limitations in what you can do. Does that make sense? You know that the world is not your oyster. That's too easy of a term. But as you're kind of now studying that summer semester in where in China, was it Beijing?
In Beijing.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you take to the hardcore business, because law and those are kinds of things that are a little less creative?
At that point, no. But I did take to like the hardcore immersion into the culture as much as I could.
Yeah.
Probably more than the other students. So my roommate and I would go out. Somehow we were fortunate that learning to write characters wasn't terribly difficult for us.
Really?
And for a lot of people, it is.
Yeah.
So instead of staying in the dorm studying, we would just go out and hang out with working class people and practice speaking Chinese with them.
That's awesome.
Man. And, drinking, 25-cent draft beer, having, barbecue skewers of, dubious quality.
Yeah.
And that's when I first drank Baijiu too. So.
What were your thoughts? Because it's a similar thing for many mezcal people.
Mm-hmm.
You go, you're immersed.
Yeah.
Sometimes a beach, sometimes a market, but then you have that first step, and somehow for many people, that's what just ignites their passion for it. But in this case,
I thought it was horrible.
that's what I was gonna. Yeah.
I thought it was horrible.
Yeah.
I thought it was the worst spirit that I'd ever had
Yeah. Oh shit.
in my life, and that remained true until I tried Malort.
Was it in Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
That's a tough one, because
Yeah.
it's like, how did you pull? Obviously, it's a large boat and a large story, but how do you pull a 180 to now make it a piece of your life? I mean, if you think about that.
Mm-hmm.
But so what I'm kind of interested too is many people in the hospitality industry, as I've interviewed over the years, one of the parents were teachers. There's a sense of like servitude there, and obviously did you intend on opening bars and being in the hospitality industry?
No. So we were sort of getting into that in terms of asking, did I always feel this drive to create things, to be an entrepreneur? And I said, well, originally I planned on being a lawyer. So
it's a big circle, but it came.
I decided to take a year off between college and intending to go to law school. I spent a year in China actually studying Cantonese, just to do something kind of like fun, low pressure.
Language or cuisine?
Language, yeah.
Okay.
So I lived in Guangzhou for a year.
Oh, okay, good.
After I graduated from college. So this was like 2003 to 2004. Just to do something like pretty chill and fun. And I was pretty burnt out after college.
Yeah.
And then during that time, I had people that I knew from law firms that I worked in before that wanted to open a consulting firm in Beijing for foreign direct investment, and wanted me to work with them on this, especially kind of on the sales side, like having actual American working as part of it, and I could work with them. And one of them was a lawyer, so we'd like have that piece. Then of course we could outsource other legal work to other people that he knew.
Yeah.
So I ended up, instead of going back to the U.S., moving back to Beijing. After that ended, I also had a girlfriend at the time who wanted to move back to Beijing as well. I was 24, 23 then. And, I was like, okay, what's the worst the worst that could happen is things don't work out and I go back like next year to the US or something. Sure. So I moved back to Beijing, and this whole consulting company kind of fell apart. Yeah. That one of the guys who wanted to do it then decided not to, and then the other said, well, if he's out, then I'm out. And I'm like, all right, I just rented an apartment here. I just moved here. Like,
these Chinese folks are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of like, okay, what am I doing here? Well, I just rented an apartment. Girlfriend's here. I could probably like get a job here, and maybe like work in a law firm as like a legal assistant. They had like decent office jobs. I wouldn't make a ton of money. I'd get some more experience, and it would be a good thing for me to do. I could pay my rent.
Sure, sure.
So I started applying to some things and realized that just speaking Chinese pretty well and like reading and writing, I'd done like translation work and everything, didn't really make anybody want to hire me.
Whoa. Wait, so all that work that you did, it wasn't something that was appealing to them?
Not really. Like, do you have any, work experience? Like all this? No, like I was, just in college, and I was like studying Cantonese for a year,
I see.
And I didn't seem, I guess like a serious enough person for whatever reason. It seemed harder than expected to get some sort of quote unquote real job. And I had no interest in teaching English. So
yeah, it'd be the opposite of kind of why you set out to go there, right?
Yeah, so I had no interest in that. So I was like looking for jobs, putting applications, went to a couple interviews, but I always like to drink. So I was like going to local bar, and one night when I'm there, somebody's coming in to interview to work as a bartender there. So I like overhear, talking with the boss, who I kind of got to know just being a regular customer.
Yeah.
So after the guy left, like, you're going to hire him? It's like, no, for whatever reason. So, okay, well, why don't you hire me? Like, I don't have that much going on at the moment. I hang out here anyways.
Yeah.
And so I can't afford to pay a foreigner's salary. I said, well, then just pay me the Chinese salary.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into this industry.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But self-proclaimed not necessarily creative person, I think. At that point, the state of bartending was beer and shots, Baijiu and shots. Like, how difficult is it to bartend at that point?
Vodka Red Bull.
Okay, there you go. Not bad.
Vodka Red Bull.
Yeah.
Long Island iced tea.
Yeah. So nothing that you felt super out of your depths on.
No, the challenge there, and my starting salary was 1,200 RMB a month, which is the equivalent at the time of about $150 a month.
Oh, wow.
Like, most people don't tip. There's no tipping culture.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
My condition was that I could show up a little bit later than everybody else showed up at 6, but they also provided dinner for them. It was like, I'll have my own dinner with my girlfriend.
Oh.
And
so you missed out on that because you're coming in later.
Yeah.
Saying? Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to miss out on that and just like have my own.
Yeah.
Do what I wanted for dinner. So I'd show up at 8, but I'd stay until close, and that I was allowed to drink as much as I wanted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a good gig.
So I was allowed to drink as much as I wanted. I mean, it wasn't like top shelf stuff.
Save you money.
Anything
line, right?
I wanted, like out of the well.
Yeah.
I could drink as much as I wanted, and I could show up after dinner. And it was a great way to meet tons of people.
Sure.
And it was fun. The challenge of that type of bartending, though, was just the amount of speed and volume. It was kind of physically exhausting. I mean, it's basically a dive bar. So, not even the huge glasses, selling drinks for $1.50 each.
Yeah.
Like 10 RMB, where I'd have to learn how to hold, 4 glasses in one hand, 4 glasses in one hand, ice with the other, put the ice in them, grab the vodka bottle out of the well, throw it up to do, not even for flair, this is just because I have only one hand free, to throw it up so it does a 180 and grab it by the neck on its way down, vodka into the 4, that down, then Red Bull, all the, and then out of my left hand. Sort of
I like that.
Like, that was the type of bartending we were doing.
That's cool, though. I mean, anybody have pictures of you back in that day?
Yeah, I'm sure
bartending and
they're
stuff?
out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you're cutting your teeth in a whole different way.
Yeah.
So how that seems, though, as you said, kind of difficult on the body. And as you get older or maybe more serious, whatever.
Oh yeah.
That becomes a little more difficult. So how long were you doing that?
Then.
No, which is totally plausible.
For some months, and then the owner of that place, along with the DJ, who's a German guy who I got to know, we teamed up to open a new place, and that became Kokomo.
Oh, okay.
So I opened that when I was 24.
Damn.
As a part of that. And so, but I still worked behind the bar with a team of other bartenders. So I wasn't having to do all the hardest work, but I was also like making drinks when I had to, making sure things were running well.
Yeah.
I was the, like floor manager of the bar, if you will, and a part owner, and like collecting the cash.
Sure. I'm going to adjust your mic here in a second, but so you have this experience with the contractual stuff, contract stuff. How do you get, Was it a sweat equity thing for you? That's why they brought you in, because I know you could run the place, you could do.
Oh no,
stuff
I
in the bar.
I invested.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
So did you have to raise for that, or it wasn't too
the
high?
costs were really low.
Really?
Everything was so cheap in China back then. Very different from today.
What was the concept of Kokomo?
It was a tropical rooftop.
Oh, cool. Tiki-ish or no?
Like we didn't use, Polynesian iconography or tiki mugs. I wouldn't call it tiki, but we had, fake palm trees, hammock. It was like tropical, beachy, if you will.
Did you wear a beach shirt?
Sometimes.
I would.
Sometimes on the nice days, yeah.
And this is the gateway to the next spot, right? So how long was Kokomo open?
So Kokomo stayed open after I left, but I was involved until 2010.
Oh, okay.
And it stayed open for a couple more years.
I see.
After that.
And then did you know what you needed to do next? Was it clear, like what the next step was? The next move?
The next thing that I started working on was actually Black Angus beef cattle in China. So we were working with a team out of Kansas City on recreating certified Angus beef in China. So I had that idea because there was no really high quality locally produced beef. Everything was coming from Australia.
I didn't know that.
So having been we had food in Kokomo too. I mean, it wasn't a serious restaurant, but I had, some knowledge of the food industry in China and saw an opportunity for this. So I worked on that for a few years. And around that time is when I ended up drinking a lot of baijiu.
Did it improve for you? I imagine at this point quality was either better or you had changed. Or...
Yeah, so I guess to get back to that and why I hated it so much at first, I still don't like that baijiu that I had. That was the $1 a bottle, super industrial. It's what a lot of people are exposed to for the first time. Red Star, I even see it in Texas.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, so that is the baijiu of the people in Beijing. It costs $1 a bottle for the big bottle. For the small flask, it's like 30 cents.
Holy shit, wow, okay.
Yeah, so that was how I was exposed to baijiu. And it wasn't until later that I started trying other baijius and realized they're not all the same. It's not really just one thing. So we started having hot pot dinners with friends, and we try different baijius and being able to read Chinese. I start looking at the labels, what style of baijiu is this, because it would say, and what brand is this, what part of China is it from. So that's when baijiu started to become differentiated for me.
I see.
That it wasn't just one thing. And, then I started to realize, okay, I like these. I don't like those.
But so this is one of the greatest parts about doing these interviews is I learned so much shit. And I've had baijiu, good, bad, and different. High proof, low proof, all of it.
Yeah.
Is there a different, how with like sake, you get the different kind of classifications or levels? Is there a level system to baijiu, or is it's all baijiu? That's it.
There's a categorization of styles of baijiu.
Stylistic, okay.
Yeah, and they're actually classified by aroma category. So I actually brought 4 with me today, which are the 4 main styles that hopefully we're both gonna try.
Yeah, for sure.
Together, and then each distillery, in terms of like grades of baijiu, will have different marks from low end up to very high end.
Yeah.
Including Luzhou, who makes Ming River. They have a product that's about the same grade as that Red Star that we're talking about. Different style of baijiu, but kind of on that grade. It's also, about $1
Interesting.
a bottle. And then they also have stuff going up to $300 a bottle.
So it's both the combination, and I'm making that little thinking face for those, because you aren't in the room. But so aroma, that's one classification, or aroma profiles, maybe? Is that a better way to describe it?
Yeah, they just call them in Chinese xiangxing, which means like type of aroma.
Okay.
But when you say xiang in Chinese, it also means the whole flavor experience. As most of what we consider taste is smell to begin with.
That's
so I don't think it's completely inaccurate for them to talk about it that way. But it just means, different styles of baijiu, and they're produced in very, very different ways. Each one is specific to a different region of China.
How many roughly distilleries? Do they call them distilleries there? Okay, because there's different names around.
So there's about 10,000 distillers in China now.
Good Lord.
There was more like 20,000 if you go some years back, but there's been some amount of consolidation.
I see. That's super interesting. So it's on a basic level, and then we're gonna try this stuff because it's got my mind thinking. From my understanding, it is a spirit made from grain. Sometimes sorghum, right? Sometimes rice. Is that fair? Beans too? Is that no? Not
But peas are sometimes involved. Yeah.
That's also fascinating. How the hell do you ferment a pea? Now
But the peas are actually going into the starter culture rather than into the mash.
to basically make that yeast reproduce, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what the peas do versus not using them.
Yeah, there's a couple different acids. Uric acid is one that thinks that peas. Anyway, not to get too scientific, but that's okay. So that's from a general category. That's roughly what it is. Does it have any DO, denomination of origin?
No.
Okay.
So, good question. Each of these styles of baijiu originated in a different part of China.
Okay.
And they originated in different places based on the climate and the ingredients that are available in those places. And then also developed to pair with the regional cuisines, which is traditionally how baijiu is consumed.
Yes. That was what I was told, is that, you always eat it with food when I was out there.
Exactly.
So, food first to develop the profile, or the profile exists and food complements? Does that make sense? So baijiu profile crafted first, then the cuisine in that area kind of matches, or is it opposite?
I think at the same time.
I see. Okay.
But for the last 700 or 800 years. But baijiu's only been around for 700 or 800 years.
Total. Okay.
Whereas Chinese food has been around much longer, but not exactly in the way that we know it now. For example, Sichuan, where Ming River is from, which is the largest baijiu producing province in China.
Okay.
So about 2/3 of all the baijiu in China is coming from Sichuan.
I see. Okay.
And I will get back to the
sure.
in a second. So most of the baijiu in China is coming from Sichuan.
Okay.
And most of the baijiu in China is this strong aroma or Sichuan style baijiu.
So that's the name of the class, is Sichuan?
The class actually technically called strong aroma.
Okay.
Nongxiang. The translations are sometimes
Sure.
unfortunate. Strong aroma doesn't sound so appetizing. But nongxiang also means like thick fragrance. It would be another way you could translate it. Because that's that higher ester style of baijiu.
Cool.
So that's the majority of baijiu in China, and most of it's coming from Sichuan. But there are strong aroma baijius produced outside of Sichuan. They can still be called strong aroma.
Okay.
And there are also other styles of baijiu produced inside Sichuan that are not of that
strong
style. So it's mostly overlapping. But there's no deal where it has to be made in a certain place to be called a certain thing.
I see.
There is a requirement for strong aroma baijiu to have a specific ester count.
I was going to ask.
In parts per million, where if it doesn't reach that, you cannot call it strong aroma baijiu. So that exists. But it could be produced in Shanghai.
And meet the, so we both, DOs are kind of complicated in this particular case. I think that's kind of good. There probably isn't a DO. Yeah. But so, because something that would be called strong aroma, you would think it would be relatively subjective based on who is judging it or classifying it. So is it a lab that dictates what it's called in the classification?
Now, yes.
Before, was it just a group of people, or?
Before, it was self-reporting, self-describing by the distilleries, but meaning, what production process are they using? If it is this 2 to 3 month solid state underground fermentation, that's the process used to make strong aroma baijiu, then generally what you're getting is going to be that type of product.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then just to come back to Sichuan, in terms of the food changing over time, a lot of people think that baijiu has been around for thousands of years. I've even seen articles which is inaccurate because there was no distillation in China until 700 or 800 years ago.
That's right.
There were alcohol beverages in China for 7,000 or 8,000 years, but not distilled beverages.
Oh, so that's the difference. Is that distillation itself wasn't being carried out, although fermentation had been for eons.
Correct.
Oh, I think that's a
good
distinction. But
one other thing is, when we talk about the development of cuisine, a lot of people forget that chili peppers, which are a huge part of Sichuan cuisine, are not native to China.
Where are they from? Africa?
The Caribbean.
The Caribbean?
Caribbean and Latin America.
Oh.
I think maybe even what's now Venezuela is the origin, but somewhere in the Caribbean basin.
Yeah.
And they were brought everywhere after Christopher Columbus came to the New World.
I see.
So when we think about Sichuan cuisine, when you think about Indian cuisine, Thai cuisine, none of those had chili peppers until the last 500 years or less.
Trade routes ultimately, right?
Correct.
Yeah, or empires, British Empire.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. Well, gin was a byproduct of that too.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we don't think about it. And I actually can't. You having lived in China, a lot of experience there. I couldn't imagine the cuisine not having chilies.
Yeah, but it didn't.
That's so strange.
They did have these Sichuan peppercorns, which are native, and they even used like certain types of one of the historians at the distillery was telling me, because I was asking him about this specific thing. A certain type of river fish that when dried would be like kind of naturally spicy that they would, grind up and incorporate.
Wow.
So, and they did use a lot of ginger.
Other kinds of peppery
so they had
things.
other things, but they didn't have the actual chili peppers.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So in terms of like how things evolve, I think people forget that stuff has evolved a lot in pretty recent history,
right?
Compared to the history of China being thousands of years. That baijiu has only been around 700 or 800 years. Chili peppers have only been around 500 years or less there.
Yeah, that's I sometimes like we think that mezcal has been around forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's still no solid proof for the purposes of alcohol consumption that distillation occurred pre-Spanish occupation, and then that's less than 500 years too. And it's really strange. I think we put a lot of romance around these things. We think that they're just millennia.
Interesting thing with mezcal is I hear they talk about like Chinese style stills.
In the Filipino,
yeah, they came from the Philippines, exactly.
In Michoacan and Puebla.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it came to the Philippines from China. These styles still came to China from the Mongols. It came from the Mongols, and it came to the Mongols from the Middle East, where actually alcohol distillation developed.
Right.
Then from the Mongols into China into the Philippines, and then the Spanish took it from the Philippines to Mexico.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's I love that. And distillation is, I say this sometimes, that there's only really like 2 or 3 things that you have to experience in person.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch a movie on your phone, on a plane, listen to a record, etc. But to eat and drink, you must truly be there. It's the last vestige of civilization, to be honest. And all right, so that is, I suppose, maybe the perfect segue. But I have never tried the different classes or aroma types of baijiu. And you have some?
I do.
Yeah, can we do that? I would love to taste through these with you. And you've got them, I think. Are they down there to your left?
They are.
Yeah, feel free to rattle around. I'll get your mic out of your way a little bit.
Cool. I'll set it up on this table here.
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Yeah, so what I have here today are the 4 basic categories. There are 12 recognized styles of baijiu.
Okay.
The other 8 are either combinations or derivatives of the 4 basic styles. And the 4 basic styles on their own are covering probably 95% of the baijiu that's out there. So the vast majority, strong aroma alone is about 2/3 of all the baijiu that's out there.
What's the rarest category in terms of market appeal, maybe, or just market share?
That might be hard to say.
I see. Yeah, I'm just curious because I would expect it to be the most esoteric flavor wise.
Not necessarily. Like there's one Laobaigan, which is really just like a light aroma baijiu, but bottled at a much higher proof.
I see.
I don't think it has a huge market, and it's pretty much just one brand doing it. There's also Xifeng, literally Western Phoenix. That's pretty much just one brand doing it. And it's kind of like a combination of light aroma and strong aroma. It's quite nice.
I see.
And it doesn't have a huge market. It's like, everybody knows it. It's not tiny. It's probably bigger than that super high proof one.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call it incredibly esoteric. It's just falling somewhere, in between a couple of the other categories.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. So I imagine you go light to heavy. Is that how you prefer to taste these?
Yes.
Okay.
But not necessarily lighter on alcohol to more alcohol.
Right.
So flavor profile light to heavy.
I see. Okay. Well, there's 4 of these. Are beautiful.
Yeah. So we're going to start up
here
with the rice aroma baijiu. I have some little cards you can look at from drinkbaijiu.com, which is actually our educational platform. I encourage everybody to go check it out. There's information about all kinds of baijiu there, not just Ming River.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
And here's a little map of China, so you can see the regions where these different styles of baijiu originate.
So 4 main regions in this case.
Yes.
Cool.
But when we're talking about this DO and how baijiu doesn't have to be made in a specific region to be called a style, the first one that we're going to try, the rice aroma baijiu, is actually made here in the United States.
Whoa.
So this is going to be the only baijiu made from start to finish in the U.S. There are some others where people are producing in China with a partner distillery and shipping in bulk to the U.S.
The bottle here, yeah.
Well, in some cases, even processing here
with
activated charcoal filtering to strip out some of those esters and to make it, quote unquote, more palatable for a Western audience.
Right.
But they're not distilled in the U.S.
I see.
This Vin is the only baijiu distilled in the U.S.
Where are these guys located?
They're in Wilsonville, Oregon.
Oh, or yeah, I wouldn't be surprised it'd be in Oregon, right?
And they are actually an ethnically Chinese family from northern Vietnam who came to this country as refugees.
Amazing.
They have a 7th generation family recipe for making rice-based baijiu.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So rice aroma baijiu originates in Guangxi, which is right along the border with Vietnam.
Okay.
It's a rice growing region.
Mm-hmm.
And it, in some ways, is going to be the easiest baijiu for the uninitiated.
I see.
So most baijius are single pot distilled.
Okay.
This is, I have glasses.
Whichever you want to do.
Oh, well, let's use the baijiu glasses.
Yeah, okay.
Or at least for you, I can use the other.
Oh, no, that's,
Yeah. So most baijius are single pot distilled. This is triple distilled.
3 times pots or plate?
3 times pot in this case.
Okay.
There are some rice aroma baijius that use column stills.
I see.
Which is not acceptable for other styles. There are some like low-end baijius calling themselves other styles that are using more industrial processes, but it's not traditional. It's not really acceptable.
Legally, can you do it?
Legally, you can, but legally you can't use liquid state fermentation without labeling the bottle as such.
I see.
And there's been some scandals about this, actually, where people were using liquid fermentation, which is much faster, much more efficient for those low-end products, and calling the product baijiu. They have to actually say it's like liquid fermentation baijiu now. They have to put a disclaimer on the bottle.
That's
also in the last couple of years this has changed.
Yeah, well, I get questions again. So you said this is going to be a nice one-on-one class for me, and hopefully everybody checking in here.
So this is Vin, made from California brown rice. There's some information on the card as well on both sides. California brown rice, and then triple pot distilled.
Okay.
So think of this almost like a distilled sake. That's what
it's. Yeah, there's that kind of what I'd consider in a positive way vinegar, lemon, rind kind of note on it. Very crisp, but also certainly acidic. It smells you.
And it's definitely going to be the most neutral of everything that we're having. In many ways, it's much like a rice-based shochu, a Japanese shochu, especially if you have a somewhat higher proof one. Not very different, not very strange, not very difficult.
No, it's not. It's mellow. You know, you get a little bit of the huskiness from the brown. Not that they're using the husk, but well, actually, you have. It's brown rice. There's a bit of that, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a little drier than most rice aroma baijius you would get in China. Most of them in China are either white rice or sticky rice. White rice being a little bit sweeter than this, and the sticky rice being even sweeter than that.
Yeah, it's nice. Very, super easy. White wine-esque in terms of how light it is. You know, very refreshing. And so although this is made in Oregon, do you suspect at some point it will become a problem with what could be a DO in China with baijiu being made in the States?
So here's the funny thing. Baijiu is not even a recognized category by the TTB right now.
Right, yeah.
We have to put spirits distilled from grain on our bottles of Ming River because the word baijiu carries no meaning. You can put whatever you want in a bottle and call it baijiu as long as you have another descriptor that says what's actually in there.
There's a similar battle going on with Sotol right now, so that's why I kind of asked.
Yeah, but the crazy thing with baijiu is it's the largest spirits category in the world. It's not recognized by the TTB. Sotol's not.
No, it's one of the smallest in the world, probably. Yeah,
there's over 10 billion liters of baijiu produced, 10 billion with a B liters of baijiu producing consumed every year on this planet. Yeah, and the TTB doesn't recognize it.
It's crazy, right?
You know, to get to where the TTB would have a problem with it being called baijiu, but it's made in Oregon, they first need to have some definition of what a baijiu is.
That's right. Yeah, they just don't have. It's not resonating with them. Yeah. You know, you mentioned liquid fermentation, which to me is like fermentation, but this would then suggest that there is a solid fermentation, or
Yes.
to get.
And most baijiu, with the partial exception of rice aroma baijiu, which we just had, where they're making something like a rice porridge that's fermented.
Okay,
So it's not fully solid.
I see.
All of the rest is completely solid state fermentation, where they are steaming the grain. So they're adding moisture content to the grain and starting to break it down, soften it a little bit through the steaming. And then it's fermented in solid state.
Like
and
a
it's
lump of
distilled
something?
in solid state.
I don't even understand. All right, so
I'll show you some pictures.
yeah,
after
we'll have to see, because but there's no addition of water, or there is still addition of water?
Additional water comes through the steaming.
I see.
So all the moisture content gets into it through the steaming process.
That's insane.
And then the starter culture, the chu, which contains both molds that turn starches into sugars and yeast that turn sugars into alcohol. Chu actually is the same Chinese character as koji is in
I was going to say,
Japanese.
yeah.
But koji is usually in Japan referring more to the molds, and then yeast is added separately at a second stage. But in China, it doesn't work that way. There's yeast and mold together in the chu.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So that's pulverized and added to the solid mash, mixed with it, and then depending on the style of baijiu, fermented in different ways for different amounts of time. We'll get into that loosely. It's actually a highly trained position to load the still. You have to train for 5 years to have that job.
Wow.
And you're mixing the grain with rice husks, which are just a filler to make the mash more porous.
I see. Okay.
So that steam can pass through it more easily.
Okay.
And you're heating it from the bottom with steam. And as it's heated, the alcohol vapors will rise faster than water vapors.
Yep.
That part is the same.
Yep.
But because we're dealing with a solid mash, you have all of these kernels of grain in there. There's probably 1 million of them.
Yeah.
Each one is acting like a little bubble cap, where the higher up they are in the pot still,
Physically.
the cooler they are because they're further away from the heat source.
Right, okay.
So you have reflux happening within this pot still, within this solid mash. So you have this 3.5% alcohol by weight mash that's producing on average a 67% ABV distillate coming out from a single pot distillation.
Oh, because of the way that the grain is not stacked is probably the wrong word, placed. And so to your point, you've got things pushing harder because of more heat on the bottom and less on top. And they're both it's actually rectifying the alcohol based on where it is on the actual pile of the grain.
Yeah.
That's just fat, again, more
and
pictures.
then of course you have the vapors that started at the bottom that maybe when they reach the top, they cool again, they recondense, and it falls back. The water falls back down, and the alcohol keeps going up. Same idea like bubble caps.
That's right. So you're effectively, the grain is working for itself to rectify itself.
Yeah.
It's its own barrier. That is fucking fascinating. I've never heard that ever.
So you have all this reflux happening. It took us a while to understand this as well. And finally, we had to speak with the master distiller because most of the people we deal with at Lu Jiao are not the production people.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we don't know. It comes out at 67%. And we're like, well, how can that work? It's a 3.5%, alcohol by weight mash. Like, well, it always has.
So you complete pot still, which would mean, I would think, that through the duration of the run, however long that takes, there will
about
be
2 hours.
That's not too long, actually. That there will be varying alcohol levels through minute 20, minute 40.
That's correct. And they do cut the heads and the tails.
Got it. Okay, so they do actually cut. Okay.
They cut the heads and the tails, and then the heads are usually tossed. The tails they usually save, and they'll actually
put them
into the next mash. This is all specific to strong aroma baijiu.
Yeah, okay.
Cutting the heads and the tails, they do everywhere, but adding it back to the mash is going to be specific to strong aroma baijiu as well.
Yeah.
And that production cycle where they're doing a continuous mash.
Yeah, that's
But we'll get to that in a second. We have something to drink before we
let's try this second
so we're going to try the
piece.
second one, which is
light aroma.
Jinmen Gaoliang, exactly.
Okay.
Light aroma.
Oh, 58 ABV. Wow.
Yeah, so light aroma does not mean light alcohol. It's going to be the highest ABV of them all.
Second most popular baijiu style.
That's correct. Originated in northern China. So Jinmen is actually an island off the coast of southeast China, currently controlled by the government based in Taiwan. And Jinmen Gaoliang is the most popular baijiu in Taiwan, but it's not a Taiwanese style baijiu. It's a northern Chinese style baijiu, much drier climate. Sorghum based. All the rest that we're having today are going to be sorghum based. But because it's a dry climate, they have to do a relatively short fermentation.
Dry. Is it cold there as well?
It does get cold.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It does get cold. And a shorter and enclosed fermentation so the mash doesn't dry out.
Enclosed as in what kind of material? Clay or
so
wood?
In this case, traditionally clay jars.
Yeah. Jeez.
About maybe half as tall as we are.
I see. Okay.
But then they also do pit fermentation of this style of baijiu in brick, stone, or concrete pits.
I see. Okay.
Not
like they
mud
do
pits
in
like
Durango. Okay.
So you can do it that way as well. A neutral surface, 2 to 3 week solid state fermentation, and then single pot distilled. The mash is then re-fermented and redistilled once. There's always a lot of residual
sugars,
starches and sugars.
Right, yeah.
With the solid state fermentation, it's quite chemically inefficient. So you have a bit of residual starch and sugar.
Okay.
So they'll add more of that to that starter culture to the mash after it's coming out of the still, and once it's cooled, they'll add more starter culture, re-ferment it, and then distill it again. Wow. And then the mash is done. It's fed to pigs. It's actually a pretty good animal feed.
Yeah.
Distillers' grains.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is blowing my mind because...
One other thing to note is that while a lot of people describe baijiu as Chinese moonshine, all of these are aged spirits.
What is the typical aging process then?
So typically aged in fired clay.
Fired clay. So not sealed clay. Or in other words, it's
semi-porous.
It's semi-porous. Okay.
Semi-porous. So you do want some interaction with air. There's typically an angel share, depending on where you're aging it. Typically an angel share of about 0.8% a year.
Okay.
So much less than you have
in
in
whiskey and scotch
barrel. Yeah. And then of course with rum, you'd have even more. If it's like in a Caribbean, a very hot climate, you could be losing 10% a year, just depending where it is. But typically they want it in relatively cool, humidity controlled places with not super fast evaporation. And then it is much better sealed than in a wooden barrel. But you do have some angel share. You do have also oxidization of aldehydes, which is very, very important.
Very fruit, right?
Yeah, and you're developing like a smoother mouth and throat feel that way, and concentrating flavors.
This is pretty intense. It's super balanced and actually quite light, just despite 58% ABV. But what I think is beautiful here is, and I don't know if this was intentional in the way that they define the styles, but the grains poking up more, so you get a mealiness, which is really cool. But it is perfectly met with that light fruit, which is not overripe, but semi-ripe tropical fruit.
Yeah, and this one. And then I even get some stone fruit in this one as well. It's
like apricot.
Apricot, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not peachy or nectarine, but apricot.
Yeah,
it's.
You think almost like dried apricot.
That's right.
That's kind of what I get.
Texturally, it's just very interesting because it's like that point in the movie where the bad guy is actually the good guy. There is a distinct shift in the palate on this, where it shifts from one profile to the next. And it's almost binary in that sense. I think it's just very fascinating. These are kind of flavors you get in mezcal and rums, but this graininess you don't see in stuff that in the States, really. I don't know anybody making that.
And mezcal and rum aren't made from grain.
Yeah, right, exactly. So to get this level of fruitiness from rice and sorghum, which is a very grassy thing, and when you use it for syrup and stuff here in the South. This is fascinating. So this is, so I'm going to recap because I think it's good learning. This is, you can send this to people and say this kind of baijiu is. But so you have the rice aroma, which was the first out of Oregon. Now we have number 2 designation or classification, which is the light aroma. Okay. Which this is, to me, a little bolder than light. That wouldn't be the word I'd use. You know what I mean?
It's bolder than light, but it's light compared to strong. Which we're going to do next.
Good. Can't wait. So when you start getting into stuff like this that tastes like this, it's so complex, the category starts to make a lot more sense. Yeah. And so as we kind of venture into number 3, when did you conceive the idea of Ming River? Because you're having your experiences, you've got some bars. I know that there were a lot of distilleries that reached out to you because of Capital Spirits.
Yeah, so that's exactly how it came to be. Is they started sending people to Capital Spirits, which was a baijiu bar that we opened in Beijing, just as a hobby. It was not a business the way Kokomo was a business. It was a tiny back alley speakeasy where we were serving baijiu by the glass like we're drinking it right now.
Sure.
Which was kind of a crazy concept in China, where baijiu was always sold by the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And we did baijiu cocktails for people that weren't ready to drink spirits straight.
Mm.
It was just for fun. And everybody said we were crazy. How could you serve baijiu without food?
Yeah.
How could you, and we had peanuts, but that's it.
Sure.
How could you put baijiu in a cocktail?
That's right.
That's
Because
kind of what I get.
textually, it's just very interesting because it's like that point in the movie where the bad guy is actually the good guy. There is a distinct shift in the palette on this where it shifts from one profile to the next. And it's almost binary in that sense. I think it's just very fascinating. These are kind of flavors you get in mezcal and rums, but this graininess you don't see in stuff that in the States, really. I don't know anybody making that.
And you know, mezcal and rum aren't made from grain.
Yeah, right, exactly. So to get this level of fruitiness from rice and sorghum, which is a very grassy you know, thing, and when you use it for syrup and stuff here in the South. Yeah, this is fascinating. So this is, so I'm going to recap because I think it's good learning. This is, you can send this to people and say this kind of baijiu is. But so you have the rice aroma, which was the first out of Oregon. Now we have number 2 designation or classification, which is the light aroma.
Yep.
Okay. Which this is, to me, a little bolder than light. That wouldn't be the word I'd use. You know what I mean?
It's bolder than light, but it's light compared to strong. Which we're going to do next.
Good. Okay, wait. So when you start getting into stuff like this that tastes like this, it's so complex, the category starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
You know? And so as we kind of venture into number 3, when did you conceive the idea of Ming River? Because you're having your experiences, you've got some bars. I know that there were a lot of distilleries that reached out to you because of Capital Spirits.
Yeah, so that's exactly how it came to be. Is they started sending people to Capital Spirits, which was a baijiu bar that we opened in Beijing, just as a hobby. It was not a business the way Kokomo was a business. It was a tiny back alley speakeasy where we were serving baijiu by the glass like we're drinking it right now.
Sure.
Which was kind of a crazy concept in China, where baijiu was always sold by the bottle. And we did baijiu cocktails for people that weren't ready to drink spirits straight. It was just for fun. And everybody said we were crazy. How could you serve baijiu without food?
Yeah.
How could you, and we had peanuts, but that's it.
Sure.
How could you put baijiu in a cocktail? You know, this is never going to work. But somehow, because I guess it seems so strange and crazy, and it was white people doing it.
Yeah.
We had people start showing up in the alley with cameras before we opened, wanted to take pictures of us. And then we ended up in a bunch of local media.
Yeah. Wow.
And then people from distilleries started showing up and saying, you guys seem to have found a way to connect with demographics that we thought could never drink baijiu. So, you know, women who don't normally drink baijiu were half of our customers.
Yeah.
Younger urban Chinese were, you know, it was all young and urban, and about half of our customers were Chinese. And the other half were non-Chinese people.
Wow.
And they thought Westerners would never drink baijiu. But they come to Capital Spirits, they'll even line up outside.
Wow.
These guys are onto something. And so they sent people in suits to Beijing to meet with us and asked us if we could help them take their products out of China. We told them, oh, no.
Yeah, I remember
said,
that.
you know,
this interview is no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we were just doing this for fun. And we all had other careers outside of Capital Spirits.
What were you doing at that point?
I was working with the beef cattle.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So that was, you were making a pretty good living doing that. And then,
I wouldn't say I was making a pretty good living, but it was a scalable project that I was invested in.
Yeah.
And, you know, I didn't see the baijiu bar as a career. It was fun, and I thought it was meaningful to introduce baijiu to a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise really have a chance to appreciate it. But I didn't see it as becoming a career. But the people in the distillery just kept coming. So finally I said, you know, maybe this is an opportunity we shouldn't be passing up. So I spoke with my partners and said maybe there would be a way to capitalize on this. So we decided to create a consulting company together with Derek Sandhouse, who wrote a whole book on baijiu, and who actually we met in Beijing in 2014 and kind of inspired us to open the baijiu bar. So I reached out to him and said, Derek, we're thinking about working as consultants for the baijiu industry. Would you like to be part of this? At that point, we had no idea that we would actually create a brand.
Mm-hmm.
But we thought we could help Chinese distilleries, market their products.
Yeah, it's just great
abroad.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of just almost brokeraging it, for these folks. But then,
but also like we would work with bartenders in the U.S. and marketing firms,
right?
And PR and
as a category, spread the thing, which is a great way of thinking.
Right.
And a lot of people don't think that way.
Right. So that's what we wanted to do. Derek said yes, so that was great. So then we joined forces. The people from Capital Spirits Bar and Derek joined forces, and I went out actually to Tangjiuhui, which is the Chengdu. It's like WSWA of China.
Yeah.
It's like Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, giant trade show, and started talking to people from these distilleries with presentation, who we are, what can we do to help you, and got into talks with some of them who were pretty interested. And while we were speaking with them, got connected with Luzhou Laojiao. And they said they wanted to work with us, but not as consultants. But they actually wanted to team up with us to create a new product specifically for Western markets.
I see.
And that was more interesting to us than taking, Maltai and selling it in the bottle that already comes in, to actually design something from the ground up, tailored to the needs of the markets that we would want to be selling.
How did you? Because it's 90 proof, which is a smart move. Was that intentional in that's kind of the sweet spot for cocktails, but also for sipping? Is those kinds of things that you wanted Ming River to be?
So we did a lot of research because I'd never had an alcohol brand or sold alcohol before outside of owning bars and being a bartender. I'd never been on the other side. But we were able to work with somebody named Don Lee, who at the time was running Momofuku's cocktail and spirits program. So he was actually in my class at Columbia.
Oh, y'all went to school together, more or less? No shit.
We did.
No kidding.
So I reached out to him when we had the opportunity to do this project. I said, Don, would you be willing to help us on product development, specifically in terms of the spirit itself? So he put together a team of 12 or 14 bartenders in New York who would be taste testers and give us feedback on everything. So we worked with them, trying things of different proofs, trying different blends of flavor profiles, all Luzhou Laojiao, and not flavored or not adulterated in any way.
Right.
But, they have distillates that have different flavor profiles. Everything they're producing is a blend, and we wanted to produce a new blend that would work here. So we actually did 4 rounds of tasting and revision with Don and his crew to arrive at the final decision. And that ended up, being, 45% ABV and having this flavor profile. And then also the price point that we did quite a bit of market research that we didn't want it to go over $25 a bottle wholesale.
Yeah, it's smart. And
$35 retail.
The bottle's beautiful. Y'all did a custom mold for that, right?
We did.
Yep.
We were very fortunate to work with an excellent packaging designer out of Manchester in the UK.
Oh,
you
nice.
said you like Britain, so
I know.
It's a British packaging designer.
Which one is it?
It's Chris Edmonds from United Creatives.
Yeah, I've heard of this. Yeah, there's some similar folks in the industry that have used them. Yeah, it's nice, man. It's very, very.
So I actually took him to China and brought him to the distillery and to the distilleries museum where he could look at all their historical packaging, and then also to the Jinshan Museum in Chengdu where they have all sorts of archaeological relics.
Yeah.
So to give him some inspiration.
It's great to do that with aesthetic, because I think I'm kind of shifting on, but obviously you have to pay homage to the place.
Yeah.
And it to me it does. I've not been to that area of China, but and all this stuff's super regional.
So you've been in other parts of China?
Yeah, I've been to Shanghai. I was stayed there for like 2-3 weeks, which was not, but it was something. You get to kind of smell it.
Of course.
It smells different,
Of course.
But we've got 2 more categories, and for the 4th one, I've got a question for you, which I'll ask you, and then that'll be kind of how we wrap this thing. But so number 3 is the strong aroma, which you've alluded to a lot.
And that is our product. So this is Ming River. This is the juice that Don helped develop with his team, and it's coming out of the bottle that we were just talking about, although it's in one of these little taster bottles now, but it's the same stuff.
Oh, good. So this is a beautiful transition.
Yeah. So
we're both cinematographing here right now to get this thing moving forward.
yeah. So strong aroma baijiu, as I was alluding to before, is a 2 to 3 month solid state fermentation. So light aroma was 2 to 3 weeks. Now 2 to 3 months. And rather than being in clay jars or in brick, stone, or concrete pits, it's in mud pits. And they're allowing yeast molds and bacteria to grow on the walls of the pits over years, decades, or in the case of Luzhou, even centuries. So they have 4 of these fermentation pits that have been in continuous use since the year 1573, so for over 400 years.
That's fascinating.
And when we're talking about adding some of the tails back into the mash and how it's a continuous mash, what that means is each production cycle, each 2 to 3 months, they're only adding 20 or 30% new grain. And the other 70 or 80% is reused from before.
God only knows how.
So it's like a sour mash where the majority of the mash is the sour part.
Yeah, that's somewhere in there is the mother. You know, what does it smell like in one of those fermenters?
It smells kind of like a brewery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not as funky as I'm imagining it. Kind of musky.
No, yeah, kind of musky, kind of sweet. And, when I was talking about the silage and what we fed the cows, it smells kind of like that.
Okay,
so,
I see.
Yeah.
It's very grainy. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is I'm excited because if I remember correctly, this has some even heightened ester qualities to it.
Oh, well, compared to the light aroma, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if this doesn't hit
the
required parts per million, I can't pull the number out of my head at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
For ester count, then it can't be called a strong aroma baijiu, then it just becomes a light aroma or something else.
Wow.
So yeah, it has to be.
This, and I'll go back to this, and now this would be the identifying aroma, I think, for me to understand this classification, but it is absolutely that white gummy bear, the Haribo white one. That's it. And not that there's not more depth of flavor than that, but that it's just that super crazy oceany tropical smell, And who would have freaking thought that just making it funkier and moldier, more or less, would give you more beautiful notes like this? It's kind of unbelievable.
A huge part of that is coming from the specific yeasts and molds that are in that chew. So that's the one place in the distillery that I can't get into. My boss can't even get into. Is what they call the chew room, where they're propagating that starter culture. That's the secret sauce. Yeah, and that has a huge effect on flavor.
Oh, this is interesting. I get this one note in Campbellton Scotch is a lot. There is a mushroom, farmy, straw, umami flavor at the end. Not a flavor that you see in spirits very much, but
you're gonna see a lot of in the next one.
Okay, perfect. Because I remember the
you're
first
just
time
getting a little bit here.
I can see the progression with these flavors as they're kind of lurking out, But I remember eating a century egg when I was there, and I was like, okay, well, this is a new part of the flavor that I have not experienced before, and that's kind of what's coming through. Slight ammonia, just a touch of it.
Just a touch.
So before we try this last one, I got my ending question for all the interviews, but does this stuff, will it ever touch a barrel? I wouldn't suggest that it does, but is that something that
it has?
It has.
It has. So there have been experimental baijius, including one that's done through another joint venture with Luzhou that is barrel-aged strong aroma baijiu. It's called Longhui.
How is it?
I personally don't like it.
Is that a happy marriage between oak and
baijiu? Personally don't like it. The reason being that I find strong aroma baijiu has so much flavor and aroma and complexity already.
Yeah.
It doesn't need the oak.
Yeah.
And I feel like it then has something else going on, but it's not really a marriage. It's kind of going in two directions
right
at the same time. However, I had tried one other experimental baijiu, which was a light aroma baijiu of the style, the second one, although this was actually from Shanxi, where the style originated. This is Fenjiu, which is the original North China light aroma baijiu. And it was aged in ex-Chardonnay barrels by Grace Vineyards, which is actually a French-invested winery there that's probably one of the best wineries in China. And I thought that was really nice.
Interesting.
But in this case, you were using much lighter aroma baijiu. So it was not as estery, it was not as funky to begin with. More neutral. It's not a neutral spirit, but much more neutral.
It's cleaner. I mean, it's the only thing I think that could even potentially work is something really, really musky, like a Sauterne or a PX, that maybe could allow the fruit, but wrestle with that kind of dark mushroom umami cakey flavor. I don't know, but it's just.
Yeah, we didn't. But in the later one, you're not getting so much of that like dark.
Exactly, you get none of it. Honestly, it's more crispy, fresh grain.
And then with these ex-Chardonnay barrels, also I believe it was only aged 3 months or so.
Ah, okay.
So it was just like kind of straw color, just a touch.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice product.
Yeah, interesting.
I like that.
Okay.
So those are the only 2 wood barrel aged baijius that I've had. There may be a couple others out there that are also experimental. It's traditionally not done.
Yeah. It's just I had a thought because this is all new to me, as you can see on my face. So, all right. So I got one more question for you, and you more of a movie guy or a music guy?
I guess a movie guy.
Okay. So we're gonna, and I love that
this isn't trivia.
No, it's not trivia. It's not trivia. I love that this fourth region or this fourth classification is called sauce aroma. I like sauces. Saucier is a very, very esteemed career, right? So going back to cinema, let's just talk about cinema. No trivia here. This is just for you. So
getting nervous.
No. So let's say you're sipping this last baijiu with any deceased actor or actress. Who would you like to sit anywhere in the world and have a drink with?
With this last...
Yeah. It could be this last mark. It could be Ming River. It doesn't matter. It's just the conversation, the cocktails. Who would you like to hang out with?
Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, yeah. You think he drank baijiu?
So that's the funny story is he did. There's actually a story of him in Chongqing.
Oh, yeah.
I know he's not from the movies, but a story of him in Chongqing where he outdrank several people. They couldn't believe it. They were trying to get him drunk and they all ended up passing out.
Yeah.
So apparently he did drink baijiu.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by either that he drank baijiu and then 2 that he outdrank everybody.
Yeah.
All right. So the sauce aroma. I love this. This is a really, really interesting classification.
Yeah, and speaking about sauce, the sauce here doesn't just mean any kind of sauce. Specifically means soy sauce.
Oh, great. Okay, that's even better.
Yeah.
Which is a nice umami flavor.
There is no soy product of any kind in this. Yeah. Again, it's just sorghum. Wheat-based starter culture. Oh, that's the same as the last one and the one before. So why does this end up being umami where the last one was fruity? Different yeasts and molds, but then also very different process. 8 to 12 month solid state fermentation.
Good Lord.
In brick or stone lined pits. So kind of like some of those light aroma baijius.
Yeah.
No yeast molds and bacteria growing on the walls of the pits. Okay. Not a continuous mash. It's a fresh mash each time. But 8 to 12 months. And during these 8 to 12 months, the same mash is re-fermented and redistilled for a total of 8 times.
I see. Okay.
So that light aroma baijiu, where they're re-fermenting and redistilling the mash once, here they're re-fermenting and redistilling 7 times plus the original, so a total of 8 times.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, and through this process, it develops those umami and also kind of the caramel to me notes.
I'm excited to taste it.
And then it also gets from like sesame or nuttiness.
Yeah. No, that's like right up my alley.
It has a lot going on.
Okay, this is good. Oh,
we
use this one. This was fresh. I watched this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Either way.
Sure.
Although I love your beautiful glasses there. Cheers. So the last category, sauce aroma.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Oh, come on. This is crazy. Holy shit. This is.
Remember when you were talking about like these, earthy, mushroomy notes? You're like, well, you don't normally see a lot of that in spirits, but we see a little bit of that in the Ming River. Like you're going to get a lot more here.
Oh my God, it is describable, but at first it's indescribable because these scents and aromas and spirits I've never wrestled with. I mean, it's like kombu, broth.
It's things that you know from cuisine.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
it's flavors that you have been exposed to before, but not in spirits.
No, you can smell that saltiness, man. I, you know those dry sesame crackers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's very much like that. Not mealy, but if they were just dipped in soy sauce, and then there's a pinch of the alcohol fuminess, like a cooking wine. This is ridiculous, man. I don't have anything. Oh, and then you're talking about the caramel notes.
Mm-hmm.
It almost tastes like Oloroso sherry finish, and how those umami notes, those mushroom notes, dried grapes and stuff. This is fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating.
It's fun stuff.
This is crazy. You ever going to venture into the other categories?
So not outside of our educational efforts.
I see.
Simply because Luzhou Laojiao, like most distilleries in China, not all but most, is very focused on one style of baijiu. So Luzhou Laojiao is actually the originator of the Sichuan style of baijiu. When I said they've been producing for over 400 years, they don't make other styles of baijiu. We have an exclusive partnership with them. So while we may develop, a more reserved version of Ming River, it would still be a strong aroma.
Okay, got it. This, again, you got me perplexed. I love this. I love when this happens. It's like there's this thing with Krusty the Clown on The Simpsons. I use this all the time. He says, I can't get high on anything, so I just start sniffing moon rocks. Right? So it's like this is beyond crazy, but balanced and delicious. So I appreciate, one, the education and the knowledge and you sharing.
Of course.
This is fucking fascinating to me. And I know exactly the people that will want to know this information too, which is really cool. But so you're in Texas. How's the rest of the visit look here in Austin?
We'll have to find out. But I'm certainly looking forward to tonight. I have to say, just to give a shout out, that the last time I was here, and Ming River is in there at Tiki Tatsuya.
Oh, brilliant.
I thought it was one of the best tiki bars anywhere that I've been to.
100%.
So I'm really looking forward to getting back.
Yeah, it's a great spot. Mike and the team over there do a really good job. Well, Bill, it's been a pleasure learning, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing stuff. We'll sip a bit more, and I want to see some more pictures, but hopefully I'll see you soon, yeah? Cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So there we have it. Bill from Ming River, spending that time in Beijing, just wanting to speak Chinese and not being able to find a job. I guess a lot of us have seen that story before. And this is just incredible category. Again, for those of you who like those exotic flavors, you get everything in these 4 categories. These taste, these aroma categories. It's really interesting. From light, fruity to deep, musky, soy, mushroom. Just really, really culinary flavors. And for me, this could not have been more of a pleasure to learn and taste along. I think Bill's kind of leading the way here in the States and helping people understand what baijiu is all about. I would go and pursue it. Taste it. Taste things that you haven't ever really been comfortable with. I think it's just a remarkable category so far. And the stuff we got to sip is far better than any other baijiu I've ever had in my life. So thanks everybody for listening to Show to V. Thanks for bearing with me in such an educational episode. Many more to come about our favorite spirits. No matter if you're just catching up on Top Chef and finding about all the scandal with Gabe, or if you're thinking, I cannot wait to go see the next installment of BMC down in Austin, Texas at Half Step this evening, please keep dancing.